There's a new study out that concludes more than half of inmates released under the emergency COVID-19 orders reoffended. Shocker, huh? Rania Mankarious, public safety analyst, joining me right now. Rania, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
That headline's not shocking, is it?
No, it's not at all, and it's right what we expected given criminal justice reform taking place across this country and the fact that a lot of these offenders who are violent have made it clear that if you let them out, they're still at the point where they will reoffend.
Well, apparently this was in Hawaii where this study happened because lawmakers there wanted to know if public safety was compromised once these inmates were released under these emergency orders. Several hundred Hawaii inmates were released last year under a state Supreme Court order to ease overcrowding and prevent coronavirus outbreaks in correctional facilities. And this new study shows more than half reoffended. So obviously that's not the answer.
No, it's not. And, we've been pleading with counties across this country to please rethink criminal justice reform. Certainly felony bond reform is a huge thing sweeping this country. And you couple it with what's happening with this push to release inmates due to COVID, and it's creating a very frightening scenario for the average citizen. In Hawaii, this example, 58.3% of them reoffended. 17% of those were charged with felonies. Once they reoffended, 3% were violent crimes. And the director behind the study said, well, that's a relatively low rate, as if that's nothing to worry about. Well, two things. One, I think of every single victim at the other end, or victims at the other end of those percentages. And then I also wonder if crimes were recategorized, because we saw that here in Harris County when there was a push to release inmates. They said, we're only going to release nonviolent cases. But you look at some of the categories and you said, well, this person has a history of domestic violence. They shouldn't be, or failing to abide by a temporary restraining order. Those are red flags. Those are indicators. There are victims on the other side of that will be directly impacted when those inmates are released. So now we're not saying you can't have compassion. We're not saying that we shouldn't be investing in PPE. We're looking at Massachusetts right now that bumped the inmates to the top of the line, having them get the opportunity to get vaccinated. There are other solutions besides releasing inmates back into the community.
Yeah, and you think about it, it goes against everything we've heard about. I mean, they're already in isolation. You've got them in a confined area. I get that you have people in there that if they get it, can it spread? Well, of course it can. But you've already got them isolated. You already have in-house medical care there. The smart thing would have been to do to keep them there, not release them out into the public for a number of different reasons, including at the top of the list, what we're talking about right now, and that is them reoffending.
Yeah, the issue becomes those staffers that come in and out. We know that almost 100,000 of them actually were tested positive for the virus. So, are they bringing it into a very small space where you cannot social distance? And that's a valid point. But there are solutions to that besides just releasing inmates. And we do know that most of these inmates are not coming and going, obviously. There are different levels of correctional facilities, so we've got to look at them one by one. But we can start at the basics. Make sure they have proper PPE, because we know across this country many of them don't. They're sharing masks, or they're having to wash disposable masks. Well, obviously, that's horrific, and that needs to be changed. But I think there are many people who would be happy to invest in making sure that these people have the proper PPE that they need. And again, vaccines. There are some states that are rolling out the vaccines. I'll say in that Massachusetts scenario, only 9% of the inmates agreed to get vaccinated. The rest of them said, no, we do not want the vaccine, and yet they're pushing to be released. That's not a surprise, of course.
Yeah, Rania, too. Also, I talk to people who work in correctional facilities. I mean, I know a ton of them. And all of them told me that any inmate who died or got seriously ill, they had major underlying conditions already. I mean, a lot of these guys were on, 1 foot on the banana peel as it was before COVID even arrived on the scene. Because I know I saw some people saying, the reason they justified or how they justified releasing these individuals under emergency COVID-19 orders were, well, inmates are dying and we can't allow this. Those inmates were already dying, the vast majority of them, based on the people I talked to.
Yeah, and so the big picture number as of January 19th, 2021, 355,900 people in prison had tested positive. Of that, 2,232 had died. And this is a point that I went back to when COVID first struck. It is a serious virus, we've got to take it seriously. But the infection, people are treating it like infection means absolute death.
Right.
And it doesn't. For a majority of us, it literally doesn't.
99%.
For those of them, 99%. Of that 2,000 that did die within the prison system, you are 100% accurate. Many of them were on death's door anyway. But the narrative with COVID from day one has been we want to assign death numbers to it. Again, I have an uncle who died from it. I watched him die in 3 weeks. It's a horrific thing. I'm not making light of it. But there's been this national push, this political agenda, this media voice that we want to attach death immediately to those numbers.
Right.
And we can't always do that. So we push it. Well, they were, they died of a stroke, but did they have COVID? We'll put COVID on it. I keep saying George Floyd's death is marked as a COVID-19 death. And I use that as an example because the whole nation was in an uproar because he died, obviously not from COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Still listed as a COVID-19 death. So those numbers, we need to think twice before we see
No,
them.
I don't believe any of the numbers. Not at all. Matter of fact, one of the things I'm talking about, which I'm going to talk about next after I hang up with you, is the fact that we went from 65,000 recorded cases of the flu last year between September and December to 1,000 in 2020. Now, you tell me. I mean, that is impossible. We just eradicated 64,000 cases of the flu, and they're trying to tell us it's because, well, we've been social distancing and wearing masks. If that was the case, then COVID numbers would be down considerably too, yet they're not. But to your point, everything is labeled COVID. Everything. Because it's big money.
Everything.
It's big money and it's politics.
And it's politics. It's pushing national agendas. It's creating fear and hysteria, and unfortunately, that creates a very ripe opportunity for people to push agendas. And again, I want to just summarize with: we have to have compassion for these prisoners and inmates, but we also have to have common sense, and we can't keep throwing out the victims. The victims here have had no voice in this narrative, and they are not just victimized, but they're being re-victimized, and that is 100% unbelievable, and we must stop it.
Rania, thank you. Always enjoy talking to you.
You too. Thank you.
All right.